Well, we're talking about snow today. Do you want to know more about snow in Virginia Beach or Norfolk, the whole Hampton Roads area? Well, this is why we're here today, and we're starting right now. Hey, my name is Sam Sansalone, and I'm a real estate agent in Hampton Roads, Virginia. And if it's your first time here, welcome. There's a subscribe button down there. Hit that subscribe button if you've seen any more of my videos and you enjoy them. And also hit that bell, because then that will tell you every time that I do a video, which is every Wednesday, about Hampton Roads and about real estate. Today we're gonna talk about snowfall, the amount average every year in Virginia Beach, as well as some history behind some snowfall. One snowfall story that happened here in Hampton Roads, as well as how to prepare for snow in this area, because the types of snow that we get requires us to think differently about how we approach snow. First, let's go into what's typical for snowfall in Virginia Beach. You'll see a lot of different places that give statistics, but really most of the range of average snowfall in a wintertime in Virginia Beach is between 5 and 6 inches a year. Doesn't sound like much, because it's not. The National Weather Service's information says 5.8 inches, but you'll find that January, the middle of January to the middle of February is the most common time frame for any chance of snowfall. A little bit starts in December, sometimes you get a little bit in March, but the meaty area is January to February. And you'll find that the amount of days of snowfall in a wintertime in Virginia Beach is around 2 or 3 or so a year. So if you do some math, you're talking each snowfall is probably in that 2 to 2.5 inch range, which is not a whole lot. So if you're coming from the northeast, you're coming from the northwest, anywhere that's likely to snow quite a bit, or a 2.5 incher is nothing, you're gonna kind of find that how we treat snow is kind of a little bit funny because we don't get much of it. And so whenever it really comes, we get really excited. People that don't like it dread it. So the idea is that when it does snow, it can cause some problems because we're not always prepared for it, or it doesn't seem like we're prepared for it. The cities will do what they can to reduce the snowfall and what often forms of ice underneath the snowfall. But what you'll find is that for the most part, the area shuts down if it snows, and it could snow an inch. It could just threaten to snow, and a lot of businesses will shut down. The cities will threaten to shut down. Happens quite a bit. So the common discussion almost every time a big snowfall comes is, well, why doesn't the city do more? Why don't they try and invest more in trying to clear the snow out? Well, I'll send you a link, I'll drop it in the description below, about the question that Virginia Beach, the answer that they give for this question, which is, because the snowfall frequency and amounts are not very high consistently, investing the hundreds and really millions of dollars in infrastructure for the city to help with the snowfalls when they come makes it even more complicated, because there's a lot of machinery that you have to pay for, and then where do you house all this machinery and all the snow plows? So while we do have some plows, there just aren't that many of them. You'll see in the interstate systems, the bridges, they'll get plowed pretty quickly, so they'll drop a lot of salt on the major roads like the bridges as well. But at the same time, the secondary roads, the neighborhood roads, they can be kind of dangerous because they still have snow on them. And so if the roads aren't traveled as frequently, they just pile up and the ice can form, and while there's not much snow on the ground, it's a little bit more dangerous because people don't think it's that big of a deal. And so they drive the same way that they might in a normal day, not realizing that there might be a little bit of ice on the ground, or again, their car is not conditioned for the snow. And so a small snowfall can turn into a big problem for a city like Virginia Beach. I'd say the cities do a great job of trying to manage snow when it does come, because you also don't really know when it's gonna come. That's the other thing. I mean, the mountains are to our west about 4 to 5 hours. And so that snow comes there pretty frequently. I mean, it's mountains, right? In Richmond, even an hour and 45 minutes away, gets twice as much snow as we do. But once it gets to us, sometimes it turns into rain. You just don't really know. You see, the average temperatures in January and February are still right at or above freezing. So for every day that you get one that's 25 degrees, you get a day that's 45 degrees. So you got to keep in mind, if you're coming here, especially from the north, you're gonna laugh at how we treat snow, but there's a reason for it. It's because we're just not accustomed to consistent snowfall. And trying to prepare for consistent snowfall would essentially be a lot of money spent, and sometimes we'll get 6 to 8 inches of snow, and that's a lot for us. One time we got about a foot last year. We got over a foot. One of the largest snowfalls in the last 30, 40 years in Virginia Beach. But then for every time we get something like that, we get zero, we get nothing, you know? So a couple years ago, we got nothing. There are many years where we'll get zero. And so I'll show you a picture. This is a picture of me and my friend Davey, where we heard there was some snow coming, and it was, for us, a big snowfall. And of course, not much came. And so we went out to a place in Norfolk, and we rolled up some snow and created a snowman. Look at that wonderful snowman. Look how big that is. Look how big it is. That's our shoes. Clearly not much of a snowman, but we're proud of our snowman here in Virginia Beach. Now let me talk to you about the history of snow in Virginia Beach. This is a really interesting story. The Great Snow of 1980, some people call it the greatest snow on earth. Why do I say that? Because it was the circus snow. It happened during a circus performance at Norfolk Scope in early March. So that year, 1980, was a really snowy season. And I thought as the end of February came, temperatures started to pop up. They thought that the winter season was over. Meteorologists started projecting a little bit of snow for the weekend of the circus performance that was coming in town from Birmingham, which was being held at Norfolk Scope. Well, because the snow wasn't forecasted to be too bad, they kept the show going and people were still planning to come. But as snow was falling, people started realizing this was a much bigger storm than was projected by the meteorologists. The morning performance of that circus went off fine as the snow started falling more and more. The next performance was in the afternoon, and by that point it was getting really bad. I mean, you couldn't almost see what you were doing by the time the circus started. Well, people came because they were expecting to be able to go to see the circus and also not have to go deal with a big storm because no one was expecting such a huge storm. So the audience was packed. Over 2,000 people saw that afternoon circus performance. Well, while they were watching the performance, the snow got so bad, the city wouldn't allow anybody out on the roads. You've got to basically stay where you're at and ride the storm out. Well, the people were still in scope. So what were they gonna do? They were stuck. People couldn't go in for the next performance. So while about half the people there either didn't get the word or decided to leave anyway, they bolted. And so there were people on the roads and walking and going all over town trying to get back to their houses. But there were about 1,000 people still in scope trying to ride the storm out that night. Well, you had the audience and you had the circus performers. Well, what do? You have another show. So they had another show that night for the rest of the audience. And down the street, the Chrysler Hall, a performing arts center, opened their doors to house anybody else that was also stranded in the storm. It was uncomfortable for everybody because no one planned for this. The arenas didn't plan for this. And so it was just really cold, but the city wouldn't let anybody out until the next morning. About 10:30 the next morning. So people were sleeping in there, performers were in there, and there's a really good article in the local Virginian Pilot newspaper, an old article that depicts this whole event. People that were driving in and out of the circus, people that were working in the circus, people that were living in the areas around in Virginia Beach. It was really interesting, and it talks about even the fact that the circus, because they had to go from where they were at Norfolk to Richmond for their next show, they had to walk from Scope about 3 miles. In order to get to the tents in the areas where they were preparing, they had to get there from Scope, which took 3 miles, and they walked. So imagine circus performers and the animals, the circus animals, all walking down areas of Norfolk. It took them 12 hours to get from Scope to where their tents were 3 miles away. Then once they got there, they left and went to Richmond where their next show was. And I'm talking, it was a measure between 13 and 20 inches of snow in that storm. Snowdrifts were super high on both sides of the roads. It was insane. And there's another cool Facebook post about this event, and in the comments, it's real fun to read the comments. I'll drop the link below for this Facebook post. A lot of the people that talk in the comments were living in the area during when this storm happened, and some experienced this exact situation in the circus. This is probably one of those storms that helped meteorologists possibly over forecast instead of under forecast, because this was a significantly under forecast storm that created a lot of problems. So in terms of how to prepare for snow here, know a couple things. One is that drivers here, we're not accustomed to driving in snow, and so because it doesn't happen too often, it happens just enough for people to forget how to do it. So you'll see some accidents that happen because people might treat the roads like it's a typical day, or they might freak out because it's very atypical to what they're expecting. There might be a little bit of a layer of snow. People think that, oh, it's a small snowfall, not a big deal. well, often there's a little bit of ice under there. And so again, people just aren't accustomed to it here. And so you have to drive very defensively, drive slower, even though you might be from an area that's very used to snow. Just be careful because other people might not be aware as much. It's not their fault, it's not our fault. Don't blame us. And to pack for your car, like to have an emergency kit, I wouldn't say you've got to like just go all out. You know, make sure you have an ice scraper. Make sure you have some gloves and a blanket. Chesapeake and Virginia Beach, there are a lot of ditches on the sides of the roads. And so if you're not careful on those side roads, you could, skid into a ditch. So being prepared for that would be helpful. Having jumper cables is great. Having your cell phone charger is also helpful too. Christmas snowfall, I don't remember the last time it snowed at Christmas. It may have snowed once really softly. There are more times where I've worn short sleeves than the amount of times I was thinking that there might be snow on Christmas. It's not until you get to January and February where the chances increase at all. Well, thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you on the next video.